Well, I couldn't be more pleased than to be in a room full of conservatives. Quite frankly, I've waited my whole career for this. It's not often that we get as many like-minded people into the same room, and I'm really pleased because I'm just south of you in Stark County, so I think that we think a lot alike, we eat at a lot of the same places. I've probably crossed your path at Bob's or a local shop, but needless to say, I've been serving this district and this region, not this district specific, but Stark County for the last 7 years. So unfortunately, while my opponent has been out of state in California over the last 7 years, we've been dealing with the opioid and heroin epidemic. We've seen a recession in this state. We've fought back. We've worked to have strong conservative policy. The first 2 years that I was able to be in the state legislature back in 2011 and 12, and we got to see how great things are when Republicans govern how they say they believe in governing. And the problem is, we get a lot of people that say they believe in limited government, they say they believe in lower taxes, they say believe in the Second Amendment, they say they believe in protecting the dignity and innocence of human life. And then we put them in office. And we don't see their track record actually reflecting the things that they say on the campaign trail. I'm incredibly blessed to be in this room because I can say the same thing to you that I say anywhere that I go. Whether I'm meeting with the CEO or a room full of kindergartners, or I'm sitting at a local library or a coffee shop, or I'm just at one of the restaurants that I worked in growing up, it's the same conversation that I learned growing up in our small family business. And my dad's in the room today, and actually we've been getting some hit pieces thrown our way. So it makes it very interesting being on the campaign trail because you feel called to service. But when people start attacking your faith and they start attacking your family and they start attacking just your Christianity and your existence, you know that you must be the conservative candidate. They do not attack you if you are not a threat. And unfortunately, that's what I've started to see over the last several months. And most recently, Cleveland.com attacked us for being pro-Trump, pro-Bannon, and pro-Jesus Christ in no particular order. I don't know about you, but I'm insulted. My king sits next to nobody. Do I respect and adore and appreciate our president? Absolutely. President Trump has delivered a sound economy, and he's put us on firm footing. And I feel incredibly fortunate that I was one of few state leaders that were willing to come out beside him on the campaign trail when it was tough. But I looked at the two alternatives. I looked at Hillary Clinton and what she would mean for the future of this generation and the future generations to come, and what her Supreme Court justice picks would mean for policy and cultural decay in our nation. And I knew that I couldn't stand and watch for that to occur. And so I went on the battlefield with President Trump, and I was one of few state leaders willing to do so. And now you meet everybody, and they're all pro-Trump, because the economy is roaring, everybody. But I remember when they were nowhere to be found. In fact, a lot of these people weren't even in the state of Ohio, and they think that we're so naive that they can actually bring somebody in who hasn't lived here for 7 years and make them our candidate. And that's upsetting to me, because over the last 7 years, I've been in the state legislature fighting for you. And for the last 15 years, or 15 out of the last 18 years, I was serving right here in Northeast Ohio. I was serving tables. I was meeting people right where they are, just like I'll do when I'm in Congress. And I think the difference between our motives, not necessarily that I can measure the motives of another individual, but I know my heart and I know why I want to serve, is because I want to serve you. And I want to lower your taxes, just like I did when we repealed the estate tax in Columbus. Matt Lynch was there. He knows about it. He knows what it looks like when Republicans actually do what our platform stands for. We see economic prosperity. We see opportunity. We see a growing economy that supports all of our dreams and ambitions. And we, even in the midst of an $8 billion deficit where we had 17% of our budget missing, we fought to reduce your income taxes because we know that government on their best day will spend your money worse than you will spend it on your worst day. And we saw that when we gave that money back to you, you created jobs. And I was fortunate to grow up in a small business environment in the apartment above our family business. A lot of people could say it's like Margaret Thatcher above the storefront. Well, I really look up to Margaret Thatcher. And I really look up to women like my mother who were willing to go out and work and roll up their sleeves and get dirty for the best means in the American people. And my mom and dad worked side by side every single day right here in northeastern Ohio, and I can promise you that I've probably been in some of your basements, sitting on a 5-gallon bucket watching my dad work on your furnace. There aren't many members of Congress who know what it means to have a blue collar. And they certainly have forgot us, and they've left us behind. That's why President Trump was so pivotal to the way Americans are thinking, the way that we're feeling, the way that we're investing, the way that we're shopping, purchasing. We're doing things differently because we believe and we have a hope that there's an America First agenda. And it's right in front of us. And I'm quite frankly disappointed that my opponent said that he is the strongest team, because they've been attacking my consultant, who found me because I was the highest prospected congressional candidate in the United States to be a pro-Trump advocate and supporter based off of my experience with him on the campaign trail and my personal fiscal and social conservative record in the State House. And they came and they sought me out and they sat down with me. And when they saw that I was the real deal, they were willing to come in beside me, knowing that the establishment was going to launch a boatload of cash into my opposition's camp. And they have. He mentioned that the numbers, that there's great disparity. Well, that's what happens when the corporate interests speak. When they know that there's somebody who's principled and convicted and willing to stand against government spending at all costs, because we have $20 trillion in debt, $60 trillion in owed services, and $60 trillion in interest on top of those owed services, they need somebody who's going to turn the cheek and pull the lever how they tell them to. And unfortunately, that's not how my parents raised me. My parents raised me to do my homework, to get into the details, to ask questions, to bring those questions to you. And quite frankly, I could come in here and I can tell you that I am pro-gun because I have worked for 7 years to restore your Second Amendment rights. I can tell you that I am pro-life because I have championed the Fetal Heartbeat Protection Act so that women that are bearing a child that has a beating heart in the womb will be protected, and constitutional protection would be extended to both of them. I can tell you that I will be the voice of the middle class, but you can come to my house and you can see it. You can see that my husband and I have broke down mowers because we're working hard around the clock to serve. My husband's he's in the heating and plumbing business alongside my father. We both studied business. We're smart enough to get degrees, but we're also smart enough to pay down our debt. And unfortunately, all of the people that we've sent to Washington, D.C., no matter how advanced and how fancy their pedigree is, they were not smart enough to pay down the debt. And in fact, they let the debt consume them, they let pride consume them, and they spent my generation's money, and they spent my daughter's generation's money. And unfortunately, all of us know, and I find it laughable because the opponent campaign mentioned, if you can do a little bit of math. I've been saying that for a few months now, so I'm glad they caught on. I've said if you can work a calculator, you know that our nation's in trouble. With all of this massive debt, with what we saw with the housing crisis and the recession and the collapse after 2008 and what it took to recover, we're only on the brink of an additional crisis. We're looking at a student debt bubble that we have not even begun to imagine how it will impact my generation, who barely has a tangible asset to hold on to. Although I have a college degree, I'm the first in my family to do that. And with that comes great responsibility and an understanding of what that financial weight has meant on the life of myself and my husband and our young family. And I want to, in every way possible, promote the trades and promote opportunities that lead people out of a culture of debt and into a culture of life and opportunity. And I believe that the trades have done that. They will do that. They'll always be there. They'll continue to be there. And if you don't know Mike Rowe, you should. Because he talks about dirty jobs. Those are the best kinds of jobs. And quite frankly, I look at Washington, D.C., and it's a pretty dirty job. And growing up with 3 older brothers has prepared me to deal with the type of malarkey that will be pulled. Serving in the state legislature has given me the experience to know exactly what you're up against when you stand against the establishment, when you speak your mind, when you stand strong. When you not only say you don't believe that this level of abuse on the American taxpayer is appropriate, but you fight against it. And you know what the ramification is, because they will sit on your policy, they will tie your hands, they will speak poor about you, and they will make sure that every dollar that could come to your campaign gets redirected. But it's our job to serve you and not serve the interests that give us power and authority. And that's why I'm really blessed to be a candidate, because no matter what happens, I know that God will use me wherever I am. And I know that I'm prepared to serve you in whatever capacity He humbles me to be beside you in. As it relates to illegal immigration, we simply can't permit it in this nation. You know, you asked about the border wall. There's no question that we need to stand strong with President Trump and build a border wall. When we have cases like Kate Steinle in this nation, where an American life is taken, and our judicial system treats it like a joke. We have to take a strong stand before these things are happening to innocent American lives. And not only is the wall necessary, but we need to understand the magnitude of the drugs that are being delivered into our nation by illegal gangs. And we need to stand firm and with justice and act swiftly. As it relates to immigration, we certainly need immigration reform in this nation. We can't allow for E-Verify not to be directly applied and enforced. That is our one form and our one way of actually mitigating the way people come into our country and thrive in our country in spite of our law and justice system, because we allow for it to happen. We need to end chain migration. We need to have a merit-based system, and we need to make sure that we're not displacing the American worker. Because that's what's been happening for generations of people, and that's why we've seen wage stagnation in this nation, because we've allowed for our priorities to be on bringing other people in and keeping our people down. And that simply is unforgivable. So I am more than grateful and thankful that we have a president who's willing to stand strong on some of these controversial issues that you and I have had conversations around our dinner table about for years, but that politicians haven't had the backbone to talk about and still are hiding under their desks and refusing to address. I'm not afraid of being bold, as you can imagine. It's the only way I was allowed to be growing up, because otherwise my brothers would kick me to the side. They would tell me I could be the cheerleader, or I could get in the game the next round. And my opponent's a professional football player, so I know he's got endurance. I know he's competitive. I know that he's able. I know that he's gifted and he has talents, just like every single person in this room does. But I know that God has placed this on my heart, and He did it a long, long time ago. Not only that, I know that I've struggled with the pride of being a legislator. I've struggled with the power. I've fallen. I've made mistakes, and I've gotten back up by the grace of God. And I know that I'm a sinner saved by grace. And that is truly what will sustain a person in that type of swamp, is knowing that you are responsible to your Creator and then to the people that you serve. More than anything, I want to ask you what you want from me, because again, I'm rock solid on these issues. I'm pro-Second Amendment. I'm pro-life. I'm pro-reducing your taxes. I'm all about creating efficiencies in government, eliminating fraud, waste, and abuse, ensuring that we have a strong military, but also recognizing that we have done nation building that has cost veterans' lives in this nation. We have a suicide rate right now that is unparalleled, and it's absolutely disgusting. It's disappointing. And when we have 22 veterans' lives a day taken, and we're not serving these people that have served us, we need to reprioritize how our government functions. And quite frankly, we shouldn't be sending people into wars that we don't need to be fighting. That's the best way to serve our veterans, is by not deploying them unnecessarily for greed and gain that is not necessary to keep our nation safe. When we build the strong border wall and we protect American lives first, we'll begin to see a different culture established in our nation. One less based on greed and one more based on America being a shining light for the rest of the world. I mentioned that we had a little bit of school debt when we graduated. I worked really hard to pay that down, and I didn't stop working when I was in the state legislature. I kept waiting tables until I was 38 weeks pregnant. So when my opponent told me that he's not going to get tired, well, neither am I. And I've done it while producing another human. And I kept fighting, and I kept coming to work. And in fact, it wasn't until they induced me that I missed my first vote. For 5 years, I never missed a vote, and I took that very seriously, because when I grew up in the small family business, I know when a customer called, they needed us. And when I watched my dad as a township trustee and as a public servant, I knew that when he was sitting in his chair and he was making decisions, that people were counting on him to toe the line. They weren't counting on him to go and please a lot of people. They weren't counting on him to make a deal for someone or, create a crony type of relationship. They were expecting him to be a strong, conservative, principled, present, elected official. And I got to watch that example growing up. And that's who I want to be. I have zero interest in making friends in Washington, D.C. I have made very few friends in Columbus, Ohio. There are a few that sit around the prayer table at noon on Wednesdays, and we have a Bible study. And we talk not at all about policy. We talk about our Savior, we talk about our Christian walks, we study Scripture, and then we go back out into the battlefield and we work policy based off of our constituents and what we feel is right and principled and who has sent us. And so I guess I'm telling you that this is who I'm going to be. You'll never wonder where I am. And they talk about electability, and it makes me smile because they really want to create this picture that I'm this crazy religious zealot that can't be elected. I'm too far right, which, by the way, I don't think you can be too far right in this nation. Based off of where we are culturally after Supreme Court decisions have been made and states' rights have been stripped, I don't think that you can be too conservative in this nation. And quite frankly, other people believe that. They just need leaders who help them to understand it and can deliver a message that makes sense based on those economics, those principles, those social values. But everybody has been so afraid to say what they believe for so long that Trump was the wrecking ball that we needed to break down that cultural barrier. So we can start speaking our minds and being honest and pulling families together instead of allowing the government to tear them apart. I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to advocate for you. I don't get tired. I don't sleep. I laughed. I saw this meme the other day and it said, I don't know what to do with all of this energy because I slept twice as long as I normally sleep. I got 7 hours. And that's true. I mean, you know, when you're ready to go, you're ready to serve. You know that there is a job ahead of you, and you know that there is a nation to fight for. My reason for fighting is the next generation. It's not for the glory. It's not for the name. It's not for the name on the door. It's not for those opportunities. You mentioned I'd be the youngest female to serve in the history of the United States. That's really great, but when you get there, you just have to do your job. And you know, somebody asked, what's your first major initiative? Maybe finding the restroom and then figuring out, no, I'm kidding. When you get there, you have to set a pace for what your expectations are and what your district demands of you. And that's why I'm here tonight. I don't want to talk so much about me. I want to talk about what you want. What are the policy pieces that you feel have been left behind? Is it the lack of Obamacare repeal? Because I'm pretty upset about that too. I'm upset that we've sent people to do a job that they're unwilling to do. It's almost unfathomable. The people that have supported and embraced my opposition, that have been pro-amnesty and have, you know, we're fighting against the minimal amount of tax reform that took place. And I think, how as a Republican could you fight against any level of tax reform when there's no level of tax reform that will be sufficient to get us out of the crisis that we have created? We can create GDP and economic growth through supporting a strong private sector economy by returning your money to you. But ultimately, we're going on a prayer, ladies and gentlemen. We're a young republic. But that doesn't mean that we're granted a future if we don't steward our resources. I want to help fill that gap. Like they said, I'd be the youngest female. That's good. We need women so that our men can stand strong. But it's not the only reason you should vote for me. I just want to come alongside our men and help them where they've been pushed in the corner and told that they can't stand strong for innocent human life, that they can't talk about those issues, because these are all of our issues. If we don't defend the innocent and the least of thee, then we have nothing as a nation. I'm always going to be honest, transparent, direct with you. Some people hate how transparent I am. In fact, they hate it so much that they were willing to go out and find an opponent to bring in. But I consider that an honor, and I consider it a compliment, because I'm there to serve you, and that's all I want. And if I can't do that, then surely I'll be able to do it here closer to home. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Yes, I see one right now. You're ready.
Hold on one second. Your first one here. Come on. Hand was quick.
Yeah, would you be willing to bomb the poppy fields in Afghanistan?
Can you repeat that? I'm so sorry.
Would you be willing to bomb and burn up all the poppy fields in Afghanistan?
Well, I think I would need to be better versed in this initial conversation. I'm glad to learn more. Obviously, that's something that should take some deliberation and conversation. And I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking to that with my level of expertise until I have a better understanding of the implications.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, what would be your opinion when the legislative branch passes laws and our law enforcement can't enforce it?
My opinion when the legislative branch passes laws and the law enforcement can't enforce them for lack of monetary resources, for inability. Right. Right. Well, I think that we need a firm commander-in-chief, which we have now. I think that the executive branch needs to stand firm and enforce our laws swiftly. I don't think that there's any room for disparity between what the law reads and the application of that law. If we've made the law, then they need to follow the letter of the law, quite frankly. Well, then there need to be ramifications for that, so whatever that takes, I'm willing to support.
It's the executive branch, right? They have to do that. Before we get to our next question, I do need to ask you the question I asked Anthony, and that is, if you win this race and go to Congress, will you join the Freedom Caucus?
So Jim Jordan and I have had lunch a few times. And when Jim Jordan asked me that question, I said, most little girls grow up thinking about their wedding day. I grew up thinking, how great would it be if our generation got to have a Margaret Thatcher? If our generation got to have somebody who actually understood the implications of policy and fought along somebody like the Freedom Caucus? I would be honored to stand with the Freedom Caucus because they are extremely rational, contrary to popular belief. They have been the reason that a lot of bad policy has been mitigated or at least delayed. And Jim Jordan has been a conservative champion in this nation, and he's given a lot of people an opportunity to see what's actually happening in Washington, D.C., which has given way and light to President Trump entering the stage and working to dismantle all that is wrong with what's happening in our nation. Absolutely.
Thank you. All right.
So I've heard you and your opponent both say we have to, or we should, but I have yet to hear a plan. How do you plan to follow through with your promises? Because if you don't have a plan in place, how do we know you're anything better than what we already have?
So again, I think the unique part of my candidacy is you can look at my track record. Again, I've been voting for 7 years. Feel free to study up. I challenge you to do that. I have worked hard and against a lot of the nonsensical moves of my Republican counterparts, both in the legislature and the executive branch. When Medicaid was expanded in the state, it happened in a 7-member controlling board against the will of the legislature, but with a leadership team that allowed for that venue to be taken. Quite frankly, I will not be silent on these issues. I have not been silent on these issues. I've spoken vocally out against what I think is wrong in government, and I'll continue to do that. I'm uniquely positioned as a pro-Trump conservative legislator, as a young female, a millennial legislator, to go to the federal legislature and already command a presence that is unique in our nation's legislative body. And so I think this is so big that it cannot just be destroyed from the inside of the belly out. Not only do you have to present the policy and fight for the policy, but you have to work alongside the grassroots supporter, know that each and every one of you carry a significant amount of weight. This is an all hands on deck type of approach, and you have to utilize your experience with the media to allow for these things not to be overshadowed and to speak truth into these circumstances. If people did not turn the cheek on Medicaid expansion in this state, it wouldn't have happened. And quite frankly, I voted against this last budget proposal because Medicaid was still expanded, the money, the dollars were still being allocated. People put on a lot of shows about how they were actually going to stop it or they were going to change it, but ultimately they knew that that wasn't going to happen, and so I simply voted against the spending. I think the alternative is we talk about where the cuts can be. A lot of those are very simple. The budget office already recommends over hundreds of millions of dollars of areas of waste, fraud, and abuse that should have been cut by now, but for some reason legislators haven't had the backbone to take those low-hanging fruit and cut them. I would immediately advocate for the easy things to be done while also advocating for the hard things to be done.
Next question over here.
Hi, Christina. This is Sabrina Christian Bennett, Portage County Commissioner. How are you?
Good.
My question is, what are your thoughts on President Trump's immigration plan?
So I stand pretty firmly with the president on a lot of fronts. I think that he's delivered us to a place where we can have sound deliberation on what immigration reform should look like in this nation. I reflect back to a Barbara Jordan-esque type immigration plan, and I think that we wouldn't be having this conversation if it weren't for President Trump. So I have a hard time criticizing him for wanting to negotiate. However, I do believe that there cannot be a path to amnesty for people that have not lawfully abided by our system. People who have disrespected our way of life and our law and justice system simply cannot be permitted to stay in the United States. And the president disagrees on this notion. So I think we need to have conversations. There could be some potential flexibility around work visas, student visas. We could work to understand how to get them on a path to where they can potentially leave and come back through an appropriate venue, but simply allowing for amnesty to occur in this nation when people have broken our laws sets the wrong pace, in my opinion.
Okay. Last question, John.
John Mancini. Christina, I'm not too concerned about the 2018 November elections because I don't think the Democrats are going to win anything because they don't have any platforms. What I am concerned about is the amount of rancor and violence against regular people who disagree with our position, our political position, and their political position. I see chaos coming. I see, for lack of a better word, the country going downhill fast into violence and rancor, and people reacting to each other the same way. What do you have in mind? What will this Congress do to prevent the fall of this democratic republic that we have that's headed for hell? And it's not getting any better. It's not getting any better. No matter if the Republicans win it and have their policies, and we have this conservative, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do the immigration, we're going to do this. Well, the country's going to hell in the inside, where the people are against each other. People are against each other. Go ahead.
I'm not smiling at you. I'm smiling at the gentleman 3 rows ahead of you who said, call on Jesus Christ. There was only ever one perfect man that walked this earth. That's not me. I'm not going to claim to have all of the solutions. What I'll tell you is I will not be afraid to unabashedly speak truth into these circumstances, no matter what walk of life I'm visiting with. I spoke the same with you that I spoke in the heart of Cuyahoga County when I interviewed for their screening panel committee when they were working an early endorsement. And you'd be surprised. 5 of those votes went for me, 8 went for Tom Patton. It takes, in my opinion, being the same person, being honest, being direct everywhere that you go, and working to find solutions. And that means when we go into our communities, whatever that circumstance can be, trying to build those relationships, trying to connect our communities that are torn apart. I know that when I travel, when I've had to travel for this campaign, I've been in California, I've been in New York, I've been in D.C., when I've had to go to those other places to talk about the policies that I think are appropriate for Ohio and for the nation. And I did that in the heart of a room full of liberal women. There were probably 300 women at the Fortune magazine's Most Powerful Women Summit, and I went in and I spoke to them just as plainly as I'm speaking to you. That's how we break down some of these cultural barriers and some of the spiritual warfare that exists, I think, just by being honest and trying to work towards solutions, where a lot of people are unwilling to speak what they believe in these circumstances out of fear of being pushed back or disagreed with or disliked. I'm not really worried about being liked. I'm really worried about making a difference in my lifetime and serving people honestly and trying to make a positive difference for the next generation and trying to salvage our republic, quite frankly. Again, like you mentioned, we're young and we're in a really bad place financially. I've worked in the state of Ohio to create a long-range financial outlook because when we had an $8 billion deficit, 17% of our budget missing, we worked like heck to fill that hole. But it was because we had a constitutional requirement and we felt that's what we were sent to do. We took the House back from the Democrats and we did what we needed to do. And then the years following that, we allowed for the spending to creep up and creep up and creep up and creep up. I think accountability is the key in all of this. I think you need to hold our feet to the fire. We need to be willing to have you hold our feet to the fire, and we have to be honest and have regular dialogue about these things. But there's no simple solution to that. I mean, this is an all Americans problem, not just a congressional candidate problem.
All right. How about a round of applause for Christina Hagan?